Dear students, I welcome you again to our subject OPR 121, which is the Introduction to Critical Thinking and Argumentation. As you remember, we have already dealt with the Knowledge Area 1, Knowledge Area 2, Knowledge Area 3, Knowledge Area 4, Knowledge Area 5, and now we are dealing with the Knowledge Area 6, which is specifically concerning an argument and explanation. I want to introduce my name again. I am Alex KA6, an instructor of OPR 121, which is an introduction to critical thinking and then argumentation. So let us follow this Knowledge 6 area, which is an argument and explanation. The argument and explanation is very important in dealing with the critical thinking and the argumentation. These are two kinds of rationale, which is an argument and an explanation. And you have to be careful to make a clear distinction between these two. An argument and explanation, they deal together in order to make a better argument. There are two kinds of reason, which is evidence and the cause. These two kinds of reason correspond to two kinds of rationale, which is an argument and explanation. And we are going to define these two concepts as follows. First, an argument is a rationale in which the reason presents evidence in support of a claim made in the conclusion. Its purpose is to provide a basis for believing the conclusion to be true. This means if there is no evidence, then it is not easy to believe the conclusion which can be made. So evidence in any argument is very important. Number two is an explanation. This is a rationale in which the reason presents a cause of some facts represented by the conclusion. Again, the cause supports an evidence. In order to find an evidence, first you must have a cause, and this will be represented by the conclusion. Its purpose is to help us understand how or why that fact occurs. The best way to remember the difference between an argument and explanation, I want to tell you that in order to remember these two, you have to think them as if you are answering two different questions. Question number one, which can help you to remember these two, an argument and the explanation. One, an argument can have a question, how do you know? This is a request for evidence. Once you hear a question, how do you know? It means the one asking you a question wants you to prove. In order to prove, you provide an evidence or evidences in order to support what you are trying to say. Again, an explanation answers the question, why is that so? So once you have that question, it means you clarify. Clarification which you make, this will be making an evidence, and again, it will be supporting the argument which you have made. So this is a request for a cause. The following diagram shows the relationship between the two. This means the argument and an explanation. If you check clearly this diagram, you see there is a reason, and then we have a conclusion. First you get the reason, and then you have a conclusion. But these two should be explained in order to make a clear argument. In order to make a clear argument, it means first you have a reason, and then you make a conclusion, but you cannot make a conclusion if we have not explained what you want to conclude. And when you are doing all those three, it means you are trying to make an argument. So an argument, once it is made, then it means you will have the cause, you will have the fact, and then you will have evidence and the claim. Now you find these two, the cause, the fact, evidence, and the claim. These will be explained in order to make a clear argument. For example, when the author tries to persuade the reader, I know you sometimes read books, that something is true or correct by presenting supporting reasons or evidence, that juncture an argument is being made. This means that an argument is different from a statement. An argument should be considered in such a way it should differ with the statement. Because if you make a statement, it is not necessary that you have to make evidence, you have to make some kind of reasons, but an argument is very important to be supported by evidences and many other supports. There are issues, and the issue is a problem or controversy about which people disagree. So when you deal with the issue, it means you are trying to tell people to argue differently. Some people will bring some concepts and ideas, and the others will maybe go contrary to the ideas which might be made at the beginning. The claim, this is the position on the issue. In order to make an issue to be understandable, then you must make a claim. And the claim will be supported. A support, this is the reason and the evidence that the claim is reasonable and it should be accepted. So that's why sometimes you see people saying an argument, but at the same time providing some supports in order to make sure that their arguments are valid. And then there is refutation. This is opposing viewpoints. Why refutation? It means your argument is not necessarily to be accepted. Obviously, there might be different views. People should see differently. And it is not necessary that when you see a certain thing in a certain direction, that everyone will see the same. Therefore, we need refutation in order to make sure that people will understand differently, but going on the same direction. Persuasion. Sometimes you might read a book where you find that the author is trying to convince the reader that a claim is true by giving supporting reasons or evidence. And I know sometimes you read books, and in order to understand what you are reading, even the statement you are trying to make, even when you listen to a person speaking, try to make sure you see whether the reader or the speaker is trying to bring a claim which is true and is giving supporting reasons which will show you evidence that what is trying to say is true or is valid. So that's what we call persuasion. The claim of an argument is the point of the argument. We claim, for example, something that I have something, you can claim that I know this. This is the claim. When an author, for example, makes an argument, it is the claim that the author is trying to persuade the reader to accept a truth. If you don't accept it, then this means your claim has not persuaded a person. You have to persuade a person to accept what you are saying, whether it is true or not. And then we have types of claims. Number one is claim of fact. Statement that can be proven or verified by observation or research. Claim of fact. For example, you can say within 10 years, destruction of rainforests will cause hundreds of plant and animal species to become extinct. Now here, you are trying to show a claim of fact. This means what you are saying will happen because you have a proof. You are showing what will happen, and this will happen following the destruction of rainforests. So it means here you are trying to show that if people, for example, will continue to destruct forests, then you are trying to tell them what will happen in the future. That hundreds of plants and the animal species will become extinct. And therefore, in this situation, once you provide this fact, it means you are trying to tell people that they should avoid destruction of forests. Now we have what we call claim of value. This states that one thing or idea is better or more desirable than another. For example, requiring community service in high school will produce more community-aware graduates. So this is a value. You are trying to show some percentage. You are trying to show some areas which will be successive. So you are trying to show the value of something. This is what we call claim of value. You state that one thing or idea is better or more desirable than another. And then we have claim of policy. This suggests what should or ought to be done to solve a problem. For example, you can provide an example that to reduce school violence, more gun and the metal detectors should be installed in the public schools. So this is a policy. It's a kind of policy you are trying to suggest, and it is not necessarily that it will work and make maybe things better than it was before. But you are trying to make a policy in order to see what will happen. So you suggest what should or ought to be done to solve a problem. This means a problem is there. So you are trying to find the way or the means to solve that particular problem. And then we have analysis. To evaluate an argument, you need to analyze it. Once you have an argument, you break it down into its parts and examine them by themselves in relation to the other parts of the argument. So to make an analysis, it means you try to break down some parts of an argument, actually make it more simple so that others can understand the relationship. You can make some parts, let's say 5 parts in one argument, in order to make these people understand what you are trying to say or to clarify. There are types of supports in order to make an argument clear. First, reason. A reason is a general statement that supports a claim. So this is just, you provide a reason, it means you provide a general statement, you support your claim. And the evidence, this consists of facts, provide facts, statistics, experiences, comparisons, and the examples that show why the claim is valid. If you are asked, for example, maybe to provide an evidence, maybe the house was broken, you just give facts that you found the windows distracted, the doors, distracted, and then you provide the statistics. How many doors? Maybe 5 doors were distracted, maybe 2 windows were distracted, and then you provide comparisons, provide experiences, and they show examples, and therefore your claim will be valid. Then we have emotional appeals. These are ideas that are targeted towards needs or values that readers are likely to care about. Now, we go to another idea, strategy for reading an argument. Do you see, we are moving from saying an argument, now strategies for reading an argument. First of all, you should think before you read. And whatever you read, might be a book, might be a journal, might be an article, you should see what does the title suggest. Who is the author and what are his or qualifications? What is the date of publication? What do I already know about the issue? So these are very important if you want to follow proper strategies for reading an argument. And number 2, read actively. Read once for an initial impression. In order to read actively, you should show that what you are reading, you are involved on what you are reading. Read the argument several more times. Sometimes it is so complicated to read once and understand. So we are advised, because some arguments are complicated. In order to understand the argument, sometimes you read, maybe to read it 4 times, 3 times, even 5 times, even if 10 times, provided you understand an argument. Do not stop to read an argument if you have not understood it. Sometimes we encounter students, they read once, they do not understand, and then they get discouraged. But you are advised to read the argument several more times. And then another strategy is to annotate. To annotate means to interpret. You are trying to explain within yourself as you read. If you don't do that, then it is easy to forget what you have started with. But when you annotate, when you interpret, it means you are trying to make what you are reading to be part of your life, to be part of what you know, to be part of your knowledge, to be part of what you have already acquired, to be part of what you have already observed. Again, another strategy is to highlight key terms. Why do we highlight key terms? It is because when we highlight, next time when we want to review, it is easier to see some important ideas. It is easier to see what we want to review. If you don't highlight, then you will take the same, maybe hour. If you spend 1 hour reading, then again you will spend the same 1 hour reading again. But when you highlight, this means when you go to review, then you will be only scanning and viewing what you want to view, and then you leave others which you don't like. Then another strategy is the use of diagram or map to analyze structure. Diagrams are very important because they can help you to get a summary of the view of what you want to grasp. And then we have strategies for evaluating arguments. Arguments should be evaluated. First, evaluate types of evidence. Is it sufficient to support the claim? Sometimes you might be asked to provide more evidence. when you provide a certain evidence to support your argument, sometimes you can be asked to provide more. So try to evaluate the types of evidence you have and ask yourself whether it is sufficient to support the claim. For example, those who are writing maybe some articles in the newspapers, maybe they have some arguments they want to make. Try to make sure that what you have is sufficient to support your claim. And that's why sometimes people can be taken to court because they don't have proper evidence, they don't have proper support. Try to make sure that you evaluate the types of evidence you have so that whatever you write, you will be sure that what I've written is clear and you have enough evidence. Even if you will be asked at any time, then you can easily tell people that what you have is true. Then we have personal experience. Try to evaluate personal experience. This is very important to be evaluated, because if you don't do that, then you might be misled. You might be misled. Personal experience may be biased. So sometimes it's not accepted without evaluating it. Because you find maybe an article written by a certain person, and this person, because of his experience, is biased maybe on a certain person. So whatever he's writing is trying maybe to support a certain person, not because that person was a very good argument, but because this person maybe is related to that person, maybe is going to get benefit from him. So personal experience must be evaluated in order to avoid bias when you are trying to make evidence. Again, make sure you evaluate examples. Sometimes examples should not be used because they can mislead. It depends on which example you are trying to highlight. Sometimes an example can make an evidence not to be acceptable. Again, we have statistics. Statistics can be misused, manipulated, or misinterpreted. Be careful when you use statistics. If, for example, you say maybe 100 people died because of malaria, you are trying to make statistics, but don't use statistics to manipulate or to misinterpret. Sometimes you find people, they want to make the majority support their ideas, their claims, their evidence, their reasons, their arguments. So they try to misuse statistics. They claim to have a number of statistics which is not proper, and therefore they manipulate, and therefore they misinterpret the article which they are trying to make. Again, we have comparisons and the analogies. Their ability depends on how closely they correspond to the situation. What are you trying to compare? Try to be careful on this. What are you trying to compare? This will depend on how the situation is. And then we have relevance and the sufficiency of evidence. Relevance and the sufficiency of evidence. Is there enough of the right kind to support the claim? When we talk of relevance, we are trying to see whether what you are trying to say is relevant, is just a current issue, sometimes which is maybe can be known by others, maybe can be worked in a certain area, maybe it doesn't maybe support other issues, so it should be relevant, and also it should be sufficient in order to make sure that the evidence is accepted. Definition of terms should be carefully defined and used consistently. Sometimes we have this problem whereby you find a certain definition is defined differently from what it is supposed to be defined. Cause, effect relationship, evidence that the relationship exists should be present. Evidence that the relationship between the cause and the effect, the cause and the effect, these two, make sure that they exist, they should be presented as they are related. Implied or stated value system, these are consistent with your personal value system. So implied or stated value system, these are the consistent with your personal value system. In order to have the system which can help you to have good arguments, then you have to make sure that you evaluate the implied value, the stated value, and then that will help you to have arguments which are proper. Again, we have what we call recognizing and refuting opposing viewpoints. This again is very important, because if you not recognize the opposing view, in whatever evidence you make, you should respect opposing views. And they should not be angry on that, because opposing views will help you to clarify your evidence. This will help you to provide more evidence. And that's why at the beginning we have seen that you should make sure that you see whether the evidence which you are trying to provide is sufficient. Therefore, if you do not recognize that the viewpoints can exist, then you will be providing evidences which are not proper. So the viewpoints are very important, which will be opposing your evidence, and then this will be making you to provide more and more evidence. Ultimately, your evidence can be accepted, provided you have proved that your evidence are clear and supportive. We have the question of the accuracy, the question of the relevance, and the question of the sufficiency of the opponent's evidence. Sometimes these can help you sometimes to withdraw what you have. Because once you evaluate and then you try to see that what the opposing side is trying to articulate, for example, you try to see that what they are saying is accurate, is relevant, is sufficient, then you can even withdraw yours and then rely on what the opposing view are trying to show. Again, try to see whether the author addresses the opposing viewpoints clearly and fairly. Because sometimes you can address it clearly, but not fair. To be clear is not necessarily that you are fair. But these two are very important. The opposing view should be clear and fair in order to make sure that what you are trying to say is accepted. Does the author refute the opposing viewpoint with the logic and the relevant evidence? This is what I have said even before, that sometimes the opposing view can bring some points, some ideas with evidence, with the logic and the relevant evidence. And then why don't you accept that? If it happens that your opposing viewpoints have logic and relevant evidence, then you should accept it. But if you have more evidence, you have more logic, you have more ideas, then you should provide those. And then we have what we call unfair emotional appeals. Emotionally charged or biased language and sometimes false authority. This is the unfair emotion appeals. Appeal to common folk. For example, sometimes if you say a certain idea, attacking a person rather than dealing with a point, then this is an appeal to common folk. Because we have seen sometimes people, instead of dealing with the arguments, they try to attack people. They try to mention even the names of the person instead of mentioning the name of the argument they are trying to say. So attacking a person is not showing you that you are providing a better evidence. So in order to be good, try to evaluate whether what you are saying, you are trying to attack a person or you are trying to provide your point and accepting his view points. Now there are steps which you should follow in reading an argument. First step, you have to identify the author's assumptions. Try to identify, you assume. When you read, you try to assume what the author is trying to articulate. And the author's assumptions consist of things the author takes for granted without presenting any proof. In other words, what the author believes or accepts as true and the basis the argument on sometimes might not be true. Ask yourself, what does the author take for granted? To take for granted, this means and the author sometimes can deal with an issue without evidence, without good reasons, without sound reasons. He's just giving a statement just for granted. And then you should ask yourself whether this author is trying to take things for granted. If the author's assumptions are illogical or incorrect, then you can assume the entire argument will be flawed. Readers may be misled unless they identify the author's assumptions. And that's why sometimes you can read a book and they realize that what the author has written, he was trying to mislead people, and then you can forget about that. Step number 2, try to identify the types of support. Types of support refers to the kind of evidence the author uses to back up the argument. For example, you should ask yourself, what kind of support does the author present to back the argument? What kind of support? Support can include research, findings, case studies, personal experience, observation, examples, facts, comparisons, expert testimony, and opinions. So when you have these, then you identify the supports and their types. Determine the relevance of the support. Relevance means the support is directly related to the argument. If the support is not directly related to the argument, then it is not relevant. Because sometimes you provide the support in order to support your argument, but what you are providing is not relevant. Then you are actually, it is like as if you are wasting your time to support your argument while you know that what you are trying to articulate is not relevant to an issue. Ask yourself, is the support you are providing directly related to the argument, or are you trying to waste your time? unless the author is an expert, his or opinion or personal experience may not be particularly relevant. Also, step number 4, determine the author's objectivity. The author's argument has objectivity when the support consists of facts and the other clear evidence. So if there are no facts and there are no clear evidence, then you can see what the author is trying to make is not on the line which should be expected. Ask yourself, does the author present facts and clear evidence as support? If not, then you can forget about that. Step number 5, determine the argument's completeness. Why completeness? An argument is complete if the author presents adequate support and overcomes opposing points. So these also are very important. So if an argument is complete, but at the same time you realize that what the author has presented does not have enough support, and what he has presented do not overcome opposing points, then the idea of completeness is not existing. Sometimes authors do not give enough support. You have to be careful. Sometimes they leave out information that would weaken their argument. So their argument would be stronger if they presented it and they countered it. If they leave it without information which is clear, then they are likely to weaken their argument. Step number 6, you have to determine if the argument is valid. Sometimes we provide arguments which are not valid. The validity of an argument is very important. If it is logical, ask yourself, is the argument which you see, which you read, is it logical? To be logical, it means, is it well? Step number 7, decide if the argument is credible. An argument has credibility if it is believable or convincing. That's credible. For example, those who are dealing with journalism, those who are dealing with mass communication, they provide arguments sometimes which are not believable. They are not convincing. You get a newspaper, you read an article, but you find that what the author is trying to address is not believable, and therefore it's not convincing. That's why sometimes you find some newspapers maybe can stay for a week. Nobody is going to buy it because what the author is trying to make is not credible. Credibility is very important. You should make sure that you have to decide if the argument is credible or not. Ask yourself, is the author's argument believable? Sometimes you read an article and immediately you believe it. Because the way it is stated, automatically you believe it. Because it has evidence, it has reasons, it has supporting ideas, and also the validity and the credibility should be closely related. Because an argument that's not valid will not be credible. So, dear students, if we follow all these steps of arguments appropriately, our arguments will be genuine, and they will always be making sound arguments, and this will lead us to development. Thanks very much for your attention and listening.